Welcome to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast. Well, many thanks for joining us today. We're really thrilled to be joined by Amos Goldreich. He's architect and founder of AG Architecture. It's an award-winning architectural practice based in London. He's going to be sharing some slides with us today, which you'll be able to see on our YouTube channel. So if you search Journal of Biophilic Design on there and subscribe as well, please. But you'll be able to see the slides that he's sharing there, and also on our website, journalofbiophilicdesign.com. Amos, really many thanks for joining us. I'm so really interested in listening to what you're going to be talking about.
Thanks very much, Vanessa. Thank you for inviting me.
Great. Well, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do and what got you into architecture? I know you've worked with some really high profile practices.
Yes, sure. Yes, I'm an architect. I like to think that I'm kind of in the business of changing people's lives for the better in a kind of positive way, and that's really the core of our why. We want to design, or we try to design beautiful buildings in spaces so that they would transform the lives of its occupants in a positive way, and that's whether that's our kind of an immediate client of ours, or if it's an end user when the user is not necessarily the client. Yeah, so I started my own practice about 11 years ago, after working for about 10 years for various practices, some very, very well known, some less known, and I've always wanted to start on my own, and then an opportunity came to work with a friend. I was kind of his employee, which was a bit strange, but it kind of gave me an insight into running a practice, and then I kind of went for it. Yeah, so I haven't looked back.
Great. Why were you interested in architecture in the first place? What was it about?
I was brainwashed at home. Both my parents, who sadly passed away 10 years ago, they were both. My father was many things. He was a professor of architecture, but he was a painter. He was a stage set designer. He was a freedom fighter, all sorts. And my mother was an interior architect. And so I sort of breathed architecture and design and all sorts of other things as a child. And initially I wanted to be an artist, but then my mother kind of said that you can't make money out of art, which is, I mean, Damien Hirst seems to be making loads of money. So I got kind of interested in, sorry, I have to turn my notifications off. Sorry for that. I got interested in industrial design, but I think I kind of lacked maybe the technical side. And then my mother kind of suggested maybe you should look at architecture. So I'm originally from Israel, and then I had an opportunity to come here to study, and then I got hooked by it. So I'm still trying to find a way to escape it sometimes, but yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And because London, being in London and all the sort of houses and the different designs that you've done, the different architectural improvements that you've done in London have been beautiful. As I said, just before we spoke, that the way you design, they feel like breaths of fresh air. They're beautiful, elegant, spaces. Really, really, really gorgeous. Obviously, this is the Journal of Biophilic Design, and I know biophilic design is quite an important element to what you create. You've used biophilic design in lots of your solutions, if you want. Why is it important to you?
I guess I can identify sort of four key elements of where biophilic design comes into what we do and how we interact with a client's brief and how the design develops. So I would say that the first one is always trying to create a visual connection with in most of our cases, or most of our projects in the UK are for private residential clients. So whether that's flats or in most cases houses, we always try to have a visual connection with a garden, for instance, from already as you come into the house from the hallway, so you can see in the distance, you can see the garden, and that there's that immediate sort of visual connection, and it kind of draws you in. So that's kind of one. Another one is trying to bring nature in. So if we're doing an extension or a new room or new opening within a room is really, I think, especially in the UK, where we try, especially on a really kind of grey day, we try to bring as much light in as possible, and that's especially important, I guess, when you're working with some of these old Victorian properties where the middle of the house is always the kind of the darkest. So that's always a challenge, how you kind of how you can bring more light in, and with that you kind of bring nature as well. Another one is something that we're just now starting to touch on is instead of kind of no visual connection, it's still a connection through sound or smell. And that's something that a client introduced us to in one of our recent projects, which is called A House for a Gardener. So they had an idea to put a fish pond in the garden. So we designed this, and I think I'm going to show it later. We designed this window seat, and you can sit in it, and you can look and see the fish pond, and you kind of hear the sounds. They've got this really clever device. I mean, it kind of mimics sounds of crickets and stuff. So there's all these kind of attributes that you can add. And then I think they all kind of work together, and they really influence how you use the space, and how in return how that space gives back to you in terms of the well-being. So it's certainly a topic that is becoming more and more relevant. Obviously, with all the research that has been coming out in the recent years, and I guess for us, we kind of we didn't really decide, okay, we're going to use biophilic design. It kind of comes naturally. We like natural materials, and there's kind of references to sort of mid-century design and things like that. So
yeah,
I guess unconsciously we sort of do it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sustainable as well, isn't it? I mean, I know in architecture and construction, it's a big thing at the moment, isn't it? You know, trying to make everything as, you know, not zero waste, but, you know, as low as you can, to low impact. So having biophilic design.
That's true. No, that's a very important point. I mean, there's serious targets that UK and the world have set themselves by 2030 or 2050. And one of them is to cut the use of steel and concrete, and so
Because there's loads of CO2 that comes off concrete, which I was reading about the other day. I was like, I couldn't believe it. Obviously I was telling you my PhD was in Greek and Latin, and the Romans invented concrete, and you think, well, it was obviously, the way we produce concrete now is slightly different. So yeah, there's a lot more CO2 coming off it. But I'd like to talk about a couple of your projects, if that's okay. And I know you're going to share some slides with us. One of us is that artist studio. And if you can explain the brief and then also what the challenges are.
The artist studio. So our client is an artist. They live in West London. They live in a maisonette, but they have a very small garden, and they used to have that at the end of their garden. So this was a really small, I don't know if one can call it a shed. I don't really know how to describe this, but they basically used it for storage. Lovely plants around, but quite very apparent astroturf as a ground surface, and they wanted a bigger sort of studio which can be used as a sort of artist studio, but also a place where family or friends can stay. We worked with a London-based company that specialized in garden studios. They built everything out of timber. They've set up a sort of mobile workshop on site, and it was really interesting to see the process, because it was really there's a lot of sort of craftsmanship that went into it, and the cladding is a recycled corrugated metal, which initially we thought about cladding it in timber, then it was zinc and all sorts of materials, and it was something that the guy that built it in the end, he had this sort of lying around in his workshop, and he said, well, how about that? And the clients really loved it. So it's really raw material. It's already weathered. It's not that straight in some areas, but it really worked well in the setting and with the brief. So the studio kind of itself is not very big, but it has a place for a bed. There's a shower as well, and just to what we tend to do a lot now is with, especially with the flat roofs, is to put a green roof. So
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, so there's various ways of kind of how you can use sedum, and you can really specify the type of plants, and you kind of create this micro environment, rather than just having a sort of a plain, boring, usually sort of gray roof. You can make it more sustainable. It helps with insulation as well, and then it really kind of brightens up the environment. Elsewhere in their house, this was a kind of a localized mini project in their living room. We beautiful. Covered the whole wall in these sort of oak panels. And I don't know if you can notice, but there are 2 hidden doors within it that lead to their kid's bedroom. So so that was a fun project to work on.
And for the listeners, as you said, the doors are hidden because the wood continues down from the ceiling all the way down to the floor, and like these doors are kind of sort of cut into the wood, so it's kind of seamless. So you kind of think the wall, the end of the room would finish there, but actually it opens, and the wood, I mean, it just looks absolutely beautiful. Lovely wooden floor as well. but it's a really sort of case study in how you can use wood in a completely different way that
Yeah,
people would not expect. So Amos, I can, you know, congratulations on that design. It's beautiful.
thank you. Thank you.
Great. The other project that I'd like to talk about is the home for a gardener that you mentioned just now about with the fish pond.
Yeah.
And as you said, I mean, it's absolutely, it's flooded with light. It's just absolutely inspiring. It's a beautiful space. If I could have it in my house, I'd pick it up and put it here straight away. It's just one of those places that you sort of lust after. It's a beautiful design, and it works really well in the terrace where you've created it. Can you tell us about the design, please? Maybe what the brief was, and then also you said the fish pond, and obviously
Sure.
from a biophilic point of view, it's great for as you mentioned before as well, the sound and just the movement as well is really great from
Yeah.
a biophilic point.
Yeah, would love to. So our clients, Graham and Steve, came to us. Graham is an avid gardener. They're both in kind of property and marketing world, but Graham is a very keen gardener.
Mm.
And from the outset, it was kind of funny in a way because usually you have, especially on kind of these private projects, you have the family as their client, or your more immediate clients are the couple or
Mm.
the kind of homeowners. In this case, we also had a third client, and that client was the plants. And they couldn't speak for themselves, but they kind of channeled themselves through Graham, and uh, and and they have a lot of plants, and we had to cater for them.
Yeah.
So some of the plants need to be placed indoor. So from the early discussions, the way we work is we work very closely and very collaboratively with all our clients. So the clients really become part of our team. We don't expect them to draw drawings and kind of build models and things, but they do need to. We do give them homework, and especially the early stages it's about developing the brief and kind of ideas together.
Yeah.
We don't kind of impose a design, but we see ourselves as sort of facilitators, because ultimately these are it's their home, it's not ours. So it's very important that we get things right from the beginning. So Graham started to speak to us and mention the concept of a winter garden. So that sort of became quite a major focal point of this project, which I'll show you. This was the kind of the beginning. So this was our first meeting. Typical kind of terrace house in Finsbury Park. They had a sort of an extension already that was done many years ago. It was quite narrow, didn't quite work as a space.
It looks very conventional.
Quite, yeah. Very kind of overgrown, but also carefully natured garden. So this slide just shows kind of the before and after plans. On the left is the before, and as you can see, the original kitchen was kind of a typical galley kitchen, quite narrow and quite isolated from the rest of the ground floor plan. You can see a sort of an alley to the left of it. That's the kind of typical gap that you get in these Victorian terraces. So when we met the clients, got us an idea of their brief, and and having those sort of third clients as the plants. Then Graham started introducing us to his concept of the winter garden, and that's where we sort of placed a winter garden in the middle between the front of house and the back. So it kind of sits between the living room and the new kitchen with the new infill extension. The kitchen is now it's still kind of a galley kitchen, but it sort of opens up to the to this new extension.
Can I ask you what he defined as a winter garden? What does that mean? Sorry, what does that mean?
I guess it's a sort of an inside-outside space.
Okay.
It is where some of the plants are housed, the ones that are more, I guess, sensitive to climate.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a completely glazed roof, so it's a sort of a mixture of sort of a hot house plus a normal sort of habitable room. So it's got a climate control within it. It is closed off by glazed doors on either side, so you can either close it off or keep it open. And it is, because it's a sort of an inside-outside space, it's also used as a sort of circulation or kind of movement within the ground floor. Mm-hmm. This is just the house from the outside. So this is
wow, loads of plants.
So this is where I wanted to kind of show you how we kind of use some of these principles that I described earlier. So we always try to make a visual connection with things. So for instance, the photograph on the left is taken really at the hallway of the house. So on the kind of left where the staircase is, you can look all the way down into the kitchen and you see the garden beyond. And then on the right, this is the kind of the front living room, and you can get a glimpse of this winter garden.
It's beautiful.
And as you kind of walk,
I was just going to say
into the.
So just to add to that, Amos, I mean, I've been into lots of those sort of Victorian terraces in London, and it's so dark and dingy. And again, for the listeners, it's so bright. It's flooded with natural light. I don't know how you've done it, but it's you know, I mean, from Biophilic Design, side of things, massive tick box, and a beautiful wood, and the bricks are exposed, and there's just so much natural elements in what you've created there. Is really, really lovely. So cool. Sorry, carry on, Amos. I butted in.
That's fine. Well, our clients, I mean, it completely changed their life, and I'm sure the plants are very happy as well. So on the left you can see it's a complete one. Sometimes some of these sort of internal courtyards are quite small because you want to maximize your kind of extension or your kitchen area, but in this instance it is relatively big. It kind of measures, it's around 3 meters square. Okay. So the 3 by 3, so kind of more, kind of 9 square meters or slightly less. So it has this sort of presence to it. It's got this fully glazed roof, which was a challenge in itself, design-wise, as kind of structural limitations. It had to have some openable windows, which you can see in the left photo. These are controlled by a humidity control. So if it gets too warm, they open automatically. They also have a rain sensor, so they can close if it rains. And then, like I said, both sides of it has fully glazed doors, so you can either shut it or open. Like you, Vanessa, you pointed out, it brings a lot of light into what usually is quite a dark space in that sort of middle living room. And again, it makes further connections as you get closer and closer to the kitchen and to the garden. And in the space itself, the concept here was to really celebrate the structure. Sometimes you try to hide the structure. In this case, we had some limitations imposed by the planners, and the head height, the height sort of floor to ceiling was in some areas somewhat limited. So we designed a warm roof, which is a kind of all the roof and the insulation above the beams. And rather than sort of hiding those beams, we expose them. So the beams themselves are a sort of a sandwich between timber and steel beams. So they didn't necessarily look that appealing and kind of rough. So we ended up cladding them in timber.
It's beautiful.
Which is oak in this.
Yeah, I was just going to say, absolutely, it looks contemporary. It's kind of got a sort of Scandinavian type vibe. But
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah, we're very much
contemporary.
Yeah, as a practice, and our influences, they come a lot from kind of the Scandinavian design, or sort of the mid-century design. And what this does, it kind of it creates this sort of hierarchy within the ceiling. The beams themselves sort of draw your eye into various parts. I don't know if you can see, but there are roof lights within the roof that the face of them is clad in timber as well. And we're really trying to use natural kind of materials where possible. This is all sort of a terrazzo kitchen, which is quite terrazzo is definitely having a huge comeback in recent years. And this is the window seat that we mentioned, or both of us mentioned earlier. So this is where the sort of cladding of the beams comes in and kind of wraps this window seat, and you can actually sit in it. It's meant and designed for sitting, and it's really nice because it's almost pushes you into the garden. It projects out, and it's sort of cantilevered from the rear elevation. And once you're in it, it's got it's called an up and over window. So it's you've got a glass in front, but also a glass roof above you. So that's why it's up and over. And Graham wanted, and he ended up kind of designing a fish pond, which is literally underneath this window seat. So when the doors are open, then you can sit within it, kind of look down and see the fish, and kind of hear the running water. And that's the other sort of element in biophilic design, where it's sort of, you start playing with senses, which can be very powerful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, I mean, it's just, it ticks 1,000 boxes of a biophilic design kind of schema. But I love the fact that you've used technology to encourage like natural air flow, for instance, and then it shuts when it's raining. And so being able to pull all these elements together, and what a great eye for you, you know, to have, to create this sort of up and over window. I mean, that's like you're completely inside, but you're outside as well, and you have all the, you know, you have the beautiful view. You're sort of almost, you're sort of, there's sort of prospect, they call it prospect, don't they, and also refuge. So you have both those things. You're kind of snug in this little beautiful, you know, sort of wooden overhang, if you want, with a seat in it, but you're looking out onto the garden. And yeah, it's lovely. So again, if people are listening, I would please come to, you know, the YouTube channel, Joan of Biophilic Design, and also the website, I do know my website, journalofbiophilic.design.com. And you'll be able to see the visuals on there as well. But and before we go, Amos, I mean, you've got lots of other projects that I'd like to talk about, and then, you know, maybe I can get you back on when you've done some more as well. But I know you've spoken elsewhere on, you've created a shelter for the victims of domestic violence, you know, which was designed for women in Israel. Can we talk a little bit about how the project came about and what you designed, and maybe what the brief was, and you know, maybe does it have any biophilic design elements in it? I mean, I know there's a central courtyard with an open space, but for me, when I looked at it, it felt like a safe space as for a woman's refuge, you know. So yeah, please talk about
that was thank you. Now I'd love to show it. It's a very it's a project which is very close to my heart. It's actually named after my mother and grandmother.
Oh, is it?
So that's the kind of personal connection. Initially, it was to be named after my grandmother, which she was, I guess she was a true feminist in an era where that term wasn't that popular.
Yeah.
And sadly, it was a project that was sort of initiated by my family. I'm originally from Israel, and the family wanted to do something in memory of my grandmother. And my mother went to secondary school with a fascinating lady called Ruth Rasnick, who started a charity called No to Violence in Israel in the 70s. And they operate a few shelters. And they had started a sort of a discussion or a reconnection after they've lost touch for 60 years or so. And from the outset, the project had huge challenges. The biggest challenge, and that was before there was even a design, it was just an empty plot of land in a town north of Tel Aviv. The plot was given to the charity by the municipality, but the day the neighbors heard about the designated use, they've started a very lengthy legal battle against the charity. It took 6 years for the courts in Israel to dismiss their case. We started designing it. We worked in collaboration with a firm in Israel called Jacob Zianiv Architects, who are very close friends of mine. The charity wanted, they had an existing shelter, and a lot of the shelters in Israel and around the world are not fit for purpose. They're not purposely designed and built. These are usually kind of big houses that have been sort of converted and added on over the years. Some of them are not safe for children, or they sort of have these sort of dead corners or things. They're not that secure. So there was a real chance here to think about a completely new typology for these shelters and really start from zero. And one of the repeated sort of terms or words that clients would use. They wanted to create a home and wanted to create a home away from home. So this is a temporary accommodation. This particular shelter houses 12 families, and they can stay up to 9 months. So I've put that before I kind of go into how the shelter is sort of arranged. I thought I'd put that. That was a very early sort of CGI. So this is not real. This is all kind of computer rendering. So this was the kind of initial concept. The shelter itself is built around a central courtyard, which is the heart of the shelter. It's also the safe haven of it. Environmentally, in kind of Israel, it's quite warm most of the year. A lot of sort of activities are outdoor, or they're outdoor at certain hours, especially kind of spring, summer. The evenings are quite kind of long because of the weather. So we envisioned it as a really, in terms of biophilic design, it's really a very sort of lush and tranquil sort of space. I'm gonna the sort of completed images are completely different because, and I'll touch on that later, but like as I pointed earlier, there were a lot of challenges with this project. One crucial one was the budget. It was extremely low budget. The building itself is about 800 square meters. It was an equivalent of about $1.5 million for the whole project, and that budget includes everything. So it's everyone's fees, all the furniture, everything that you can think of. So some bits of the design were cut out. So you'll see which ones in a few minutes. The other concept behind is really seeing there was this notion of home. So we wanted to each room is actually a house that a family gets. So each of these houses house two rooms in it. So these are two families within a house. And the shelter is kind of seen as a small village, or in the connotations of Israel, like a small kibbutz. So these houses are then connected by a street, which in this case is a internal external corridor that links all the houses together and also surrounds this internal courtyard. And that's where so this is a shelter for women and their children. So in the morning, the kids either go out to school, which is outside of the shelter but nearby, or within the shelter there's a nursery, there are other classrooms, there's all the admin facilities of the charity, there's a dining hall, so they kind of work in the kitchen. So that kind of links everything together. And these are just some of the photos of really this central courtyard. And shortly before it completed, and because we were kind of working remotely on it, the client sent me a photo of the courtyard, hinting towards this really green central thing. And it kind of looked too green to be true, and in fact it's astroturf, so it's not real grass. And I'm kind of said, no, you can't do that. And they said, well, listen, Amos, this shelter, this building, first of all, it needs to be safe, which is it is. It needs to be very practical, and they had to cut a lot of the budget, and a lot of the things that went were all the plants and all the sort of irrigation of it. So if they can save money by not needing to irrigate the grass and so on, that's a huge saving for them, because they rely on private donations.
Of course, yeah, and also, I
a
mean,
lot.
yeah, I was going to say, if it's astroturf, it's still biophilic design because it's a simulation of nature. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's a visual
true.
representation. So, and you've got the
That's
outside,
true.
inside. So yeah,
But interestingly, with this project is that it's an evolving building. As architects, we kind of design things and they look great when it's finished, but we have to remember that we design it for someone, and once we kind of pass it over,
yeah,
it kind of stops becoming our thing or our creation, and then it's really it's at the mercy of the end user.
yeah,
And in this case, they've started, so they every now and then they get a donation of plants, so they've started planting within this courtyard. So maybe it's not plants that go into the ground, but they sit in big pots. So I sort of visited the shelter about a year after it opened, and it was interesting to see those personal touches that they've added. So, I mean, from an architect sort of point of view, yes, it's a bit crude and it's not something that we probably would have designed, but it works, and it benefits
that's the main thing.
the women and the children.
Yeah, yeah,
So you can see here, the majority of the shelter is on one level, so it's fully accessible for sort of disabled women and children. Apart from the two-story block on the right, which is mostly the admin accommodation for the charity. So that's where they have their main offices and the helplines and kind of lawyers and social workers and so on. I jumped ahead. So yeah, it was a very rewarding project on many levels.
Yeah, and the photograph that you're showing right now, there's kids playing in the middle of it on this sort of astroturf, on this sort of green simulation of thing, and you can see the plants, you know, these huge palm trees that are over that sort of, obviously they're outside the building, but you can see them inside the building because the whole focus is being outside and sort of being, you know, in the natural world, if you want, you know, as well, but being embraced by this haven, by this home.
Exactly.
It's a lovely space, and I can hear that you're really passionate about it, and it's a really personal project for you. So Amos, thanks very much for sharing that.
Sadly my mother passed away through sort of construction, so it is now named after both of them. So
that's a nice thing. Well, Amos, thanks so much for sharing this with us and the other two projects. And as a really a final question, which our regular listeners will know, if you could brush the world with a magic brush of biophilia in sort of in architecture land, what would that look like for you?
I really like that question, and I thought hard about it. So I chose 3 images to kind of provoke something. So on the far left, this is an actual housing block in Italy, in Milan. I think it's called the Bosco Tower. I don't have the name of the architect with me, but yeah, these are all flats, all have these sort of cantilevered balconies that are just filled with plants. So these are not plants that the residents have put in. This was part of the part of the design from the outset, and it has huge sort of environmental benefits, both from a kind of biophilic sort of design, but also sort of this microclimate and carbon and so on. So I thought that was a quite a striking image to start with, and that particular project, I guess, sort of influenced a lot of other projects that are being built, and we are seeing more and more kind of the use of plants within architecture, and it's not an afterthought. It is something that we as designers we incorporate them at the very early stages. Similarly, with our house for a gardener. I really like the middle image. I don't know who designed it, but it's in Turkey. I think it's maybe a public building of some sort, and it's where the architecture really adapts itself to the site, to the site conditions. So in this case, it's amazing tree, and I'm sure it wasn't that. I'm sure it was difficult to kind of build around it, and it's they've literally built around it, and kind of the tree kind of goes through the architecture. So
it's actually like circular holes cut in in one of the floors so that the tree can grow through, and what floors actually, isn't it? It's like it's a bonkers.
I really like that, and there's a lot of, I guess, trees impose a lot of challenges because you can't build very close to them. You need to protect the roots when you do. Some of the trees, especially in the UK, are protected, so they're really, you can't really do anything to them. In some instances, you can relocate them, and then sadly, sometimes they are cut down. But this just shows that if you are creative enough, you can always find a really interesting solution. And then the right one is again kind of it's really pushing it even further, where you start planting plants within your house. So it's not in a pot. So this is a kind of an entrance living room of a house. I mean, the design itself is very, very minimal, but I guess kind of bringing kind of plants in and integrating them really with the interior space completely changes the feel of it. So yeah, this is my choice.
Thank you for listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.